Hi, my name's Caroline. Welcome to my channel. Today I thought we could have a chat about empty nest. Empty nest when you have sort of grown up children, sort of either later teens going off to uni, or like me, a son in his 20s who's just gone off backpacking, or perhaps a bit older when they're actually sort of fully moving out into maybe their first home, as a very permanent move. And empty nest usually can refer to any of those, and it's more really pointing to the experience of the person left behind, or people left behind, usually the parent or the caregiver. um, Most sort of stereotypically, we would see that as being something that the mother or mother figure generally experiences, but I'm pretty sure this applies to any gender, and it's more about the relationship that you have with your grown up child, and that feeling that change in lifestyle, that feeling of having living in an empty or emptier place. But it's not really about the physical space. It's more about the emotions that this is generating for us as we sit in that place of change. And yeah, so it's very present for me at the moment, because my son, as I said, he's gone off backpacking. And so this is the second wave of the empty nest experience for me, because he did go off to university, but he was at university during the pandemic. So he went and came back, spent best part of the second year back at home, and then in his final year back at uni, and then he came back, and now he has gone. But it is a very different experience, and so I thought maybe I'll touch on the differences around sort of children going off to uni versus the sort of traveling backpacking, and then versus the sort of more permanent moving out. And I think so, sort of looking at this in terms of a change in lifestyle for me as a parent, and as I say, that sense of change, and how that affects us, and also what it means to us in terms of our identity, in terms of our life purpose. We generally, we become very invested in our children. Spend a lot of time, sort of, hopefully spend a lot of time nurturing them, and in an ideal world we're giving them roots and wings. That's the saying, isn't it, that to keep them so they feel safe enough, so that they're able to go out and explore. And I, for one, was always very much promoting the idea to him of being able to sort of go off and see other countries and experience that kind of that hero's journey, the mythical sort of idea that a lot of our stories and fairy stories are based, fairy tales are based around, is that sense of, they grow up and then they have to, the hero goes out and is on his or her own in the wilderness, and they have lots of ventures, have lots of challenges, find themselves because they don't have, they're not being pampered or looked after, and they have to really dig deep. They have to develop tenacity, resilience, and sort of inner strength, inner courage, and it's a very in theory it's supposed to be this very kind of personality building experience. So they go out and then they slay their dragons, you know, or you know, a metaphor potentially for, you know, going out and confronting all their fears in inverted commas, and then they can come back with the riches, and those riches again being a metaphor for all of these new amazing skills that they've learned and that they've discovered within themselves on this hero's journey, whether it's at university, whether it's backpacking, whether it's, you know, moving to a different country or moving across country, starting a new job, or whether it's like a more permanent sort of moving out of the childhood home or the security of being with their parent or parents. So yeah, that's the kind of the sense of what's going on, and you know, and ideally that's what we want for them on a logical, rational level. That's what we want our children to be able to do, to have this confidence, to be able to go out and have all these adventures. However, on an emotional level, you know, how do we come to terms with that? How do we sit in that space of letting them go, really like cutting the apron strings is sort of the old saying, isn't it? And letting them go. You know, and the on some levels we could say it's easier these days because we have mobile phones, we can keep track of them. On the other hand, possibly it's harder because if we don't hear from them, you know, what's happened to them, you know, why aren't they messaging, what, you know, and if they're in a place where there's no Wi-Fi, you know, we kind of have this sense that, well, you can get onto a Wi-Fi network wherever in the world, but actually no, there are places where you can't, and especially if they're abroad, and maybe they just don't want to get in touch with us, and that's also very important to acknowledge, you know, and very healthy separation, a very healthy detachment, whereby they don't feel obliged to be in touch. But for the person left behind, that's a very tricky process to navigate emotionally. Um, you know, especially if we feel that, you know, they might have certain vulnerabilities, or if they're particularly sensitive, we might worry about what's happening for them. Um, and all of that stuff that keeps us awake at night as a parent. And looking at it in terms of sort of therapy or counselling, psychological theory, we can put it in the framework of loss. Even if it's a temporary loss, we're still looking at a loss, even if that is just a loss of a certain lifestyle, or a loss of feeling as though there are babies, or, you know, or there are younger children, and it's like that shift for when they're moving into more of a grown-up space, and hopefully they don't need us so much, but what does that mean? What's that mean for us? And when we look at loss theoretically, historically, the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross had a very helpful grief cycle model, which it's been modernised now, but the basic stages are just interesting, I think, to remind ourselves of. And although they're not stages that we go through sort of gradually, or necessarily one after the other, we can drop in and out, and in any hour we might find ourselves feeling a real mix of emotions. And but the basic stages are so denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and then sort of more recently there's this idea which I think is really helpful of, you know, then making meaning of what's happened. And so whether our kids are going away and then they, you know, they'll be back, you know, possibly, we're still going through this grieving cycle because things have changed, and you know, they may not be back, you know, and that's the reality of any changes and any sort of stages of our life. And so the denial stage is that part whereby we know perhaps we're still in a bit of shock that this has actually happened. You know, logically, rationally, we know that, you know, perhaps there's been preparation. Usually there's a bit of preparation for this kind of thing, but and rationally we may have prepped ourselves, but actually on an emotional level it may not have really sort of hit us, in like a feeling sense of that process. We may not have actually felt that they are gone or that they are going, and so, you know, there can be a certain level of denial that might sort of hit us at a later stage, or it might take quite a while actually for it to kick in. The anger might be, you know, so on a very sort of practical level, you know, you might find yourself getting really angry with your child, your grown-up child, you know, if they haven't sort of got themselves organized, or you might find yourself being angry, you know, projecting it onto someone else or something else, because, you know, on a subconscious level, we, all of us, have a fear of rejection. And even though rationally, you know, we might want our children to go out and have these amazing experiences, on a subconscious level we may feel a sense of rejection, even though that may not be something that we're fully aware of or logically can comprehend. On an emotional level we may feel sort of a bit angry, a bit pissed off with them actually, or as I say, we may that may not come out in a very healthy way. We may end up projecting it onto someone else. If, you know, a friend says something that annoys us, or if our friends don't seem to be very understanding, we might find ourselves, you know, feeling a bit, you know, a bit shitty with them because, you know, they don't understand what it's like for me. And then the bargaining side of things, and this is more about sort of a way in which we can create a fantasy of control actually, because it might feel quite big, accepting that our kids have gone, or you know, have gone, even if it's temporarily gone. And this bargaining is, you know, maybe that thing about, you know, appealing to a higher power. If you keep my son safe, then I will be, you know, this amazingly good person for forevermore, right? You know, I will never be pissed off with him ever again if you keep, you know, if you keep my son safe on his travels, let's say. And again, these are all interchangeable. We can sort of dot in and out of all of these feelings. And then there's the depression, whereby actually we are starting to, the reality is kind of starting to sink in, that actually they're gone, they're not coming back, or they're certainly not coming back for a while, and actually we don't have much control over that really. And it's sort of really is sort of starting to set in that, you know, maybe we feel a bit helpless about that, you know, maybe we have to just sit back and kind of go, you know, I really hope I did a good enough parenting job. I really hope that, you know, if they're at uni, you know, if they're drinking or taking drugs or engaging in risky behaviour, you know, I just hope they keep safe. I hope that they are responsible enough to pay their bills and go to some lectures and to get their work done. Um, but that can feel like quite a hopeless, helpless place to be in as a parent, especially because, you know, up until that time, you know, we may have done quite a lot for our kids, and I'm not throwing any shade there because you know, I tried not to, but often, you know, I slip into that sort of rescuing role. And then, you know, finally, hopefully, we go through these sort of tumultuous emotions, and hopefully, we can then come to a space of acceptance, and acceptance in a, which doesn't necessarily mean say we like this new change, or maybe we do. Maybe actually we find like we've got a new lease of life, and, you know, all these hours I used to spend worrying about them, or, you know, driving them round or paying for them, you know, wow, I've got a newfound freedom here. Um, and then sort of tagged on the end of that, which, and this is usually sort of looked at in terms of sort of grief as in sort of the physical death of someone, but we can still apply it to this as well, and that's making meaning of this whole process, making meaning of it. And so, you know, being able to accept that, you know, yes, they may go to uni, they may drink too much, they may not get the grades that, you know, we hope they would, but ultimately, you know, it's going to give them the experiences that they need to have in life. That, you know, we all need to face some challenges. We can't be, you know, wrapped in cotton wool our whole lives. And the same with, for example, you know, backpacking, or the permanent moving out. You know, what meaning can we make of that, and what meaning can we then make of our own lives, in relation to what our kids are now doing. And that can be the tricky part as well. That could be a real roadblock because, you know, if we have invested, you know, maybe we've over invested in our kids. You know, maybe we have, you know, abandoned ourselves a little bit, or even a lot. You know, maybe we've always put our self-care at the bottom of the pile. You know, maybe we haven't engaged in hobbies and friendships or relationships or a career that we wanted, perhaps because we were putting our kids first. I'm not saying you have, it's just these are themes that can often come up, especially in the work that I do. So it can feel as though a really big part of our lives have changed when our kids go. We can feel as though our whole identity has, you know, I used to be, you know, I'm a mum, for example. I'm a mum. What am I now? If my son doesn't need me, who am I? Who am I? And I imagine that must be particularly difficult, for parents or caregivers who haven't also been working, or haven't worked in a career style job. I think the work of being a parent is the hardest job you can do. But so, you know, if you have had other work as well, then, you know, maybe that's softened a little bit, but that might be really tough for you. And also to sort of just drop in here as well, a sense that when we are experiencing a loss of any kind, whether that's a change of lifestyle, whether that's moving home, whether that's changing career, whether that's our kids moving out, or any other sort of big, you know, if we have a big operation and so we're going to be in hospital for a long time, all of this stuff, these are losses, and that any one loss can then trigger memories of other losses that we've had in the past, particularly if we haven't been able to fully process those losses. So if we've lost to permanent loss, as in if someone who we love has died, other losses can trigger unresolved feelings of grief. It can really bring back up though that the complicated mix of emotions, if we haven't sort of really gone through that process. And even if we have gone through that process, it can still really remind us of other people who've departed and who are no longer with us physically. So just to kind of mention that, and to be kind to yourself if you can, around that. Also, it might be worth mentioning that this often the empty nest sort of time of our lives can fall around times of other changes that are going on for us. And that might be, particularly for women, that might be around menopause and a real sort of change in hormones, which and that can also bring around changes in sleep, body shape changes in energy, changes in mood, anxiety, depression, you name it. And I think that's definitely another topic to be have a chat about. But yeah, menopause can really bring about some quite difficult feelings for us. And so when we're then layering in, our children going, or one of our children going, that can be really tricky to navigate. Yeah, maybe maybe we are in the process of perhaps downsizing as well. Do we want to stay in a big place if our children have gone, and how's that going to be, moving home as well as our or hard on the heels of our children moving out, is that going to be really tough on us as well? Often it can coincide as well with our own parents, if we still have our own parents in our lives. If they're getting older, do we also have additional responsibilities, along with potentially our career and all the other things that maybe we're juggling. So quite often at this sort of stage in our lives, if you're in your 50s like me, or in that ballpark, then maybe there are other things that are going on, as well as our children leaving. So yeah, just to kind of acknowledge that, I guess, and just to sort of be aware that this is very layered. And so what's my advice? I mean, as always, I would say, the standard advice is to reach out and connect to other people. But there are sort of the 3 C's of healing grief. And I think it's a bit trite, but actually it probably is quite helpful to be reminded of the 3 C's. And so the first C is C for choose. So remembering you have choices. So for example, if let's say you would usually have a big family get-togethers on certain birthdays, and let's say your child is either abroad or at uni, or moved out in a different country or can't make it, sitting an exam, studying, drunk somewhere, who knows. Um, so for whatever reason, if they wouldn't be able to come to that event, just, you have choices. Do you still want to do the same, have the same traditions that you had? you know do you want to go ahead with that event without them, or would it feel better for you? Like, what feels good for you? You have choices here. And I think, we can push ourselves to try and I've got a video about, being strong. Don't be weak or needy. Often we can just sort of push through those times and sort of paste on a mask of, oh no, everything's fine, I've got it all covered. But actually, what, maybe rather than doing the big family barbecue, do I just want to curl up in bed with a book? Do I want to just, go for a drink with my mate? Do I want to have a bath or put on a soppy film? What's going to help me get through that particular date? Let's say, if there's a particular date that's important, and just, empowering yourself with that knowledge that you don't have to just keep pushing through just because you always have. Or even though it might be a family tradition, traditions change all the time. you know maybe this year you skip it. Maybe you say, you know what, I'm putting it on ice, let's do it next year. So just a reminder that and reminding myself as well, we have choices. And the second C is connect. So yeah, that sense of, it might feel quite tempting if you're particularly in the depression phase of the grief. You may feel as though you don't really want to be around other people, and that's fine. Go back to the first C. You have choices, but sometimes connecting with others can be the tonic that we need, but that's only if those other people are trusted people, if they are safe people, because the invitation there is to be able to be vulnerable about how you're feeling, and if it's not going to be good for you to be vulnerable with people who aren't able to hold those emotions. If you feel as though maybe your friends don't really get it, or perhaps if they don't have children, although I have friends without children who have bags of empathy around the relationship I have. But if you have, or if your friends, maybe if their children are at a different stage, or if they're just not really able, not particularly in touch with their empathy or their emotions, or maybe they've got too much going on in their lives to be there for you. So to just invite you really to tune into your intuition around, who would be a really good person that would just give me a bit of space to talk about, if I feel sad, I can have a cry with them. And if that's not okay, then the third C is communicate. And so if that is with your friends or family, brilliant. But if not, then my advice would most definitely be to find a therapist who you feel safe with, who you feel comfortable with. Definitely one that is qualified, definitely one, I would always recommend the BACP, but there are other counselling bodies. So and if you if you do decide to go down that route and to speak to a therapist, you know, for sure reach out to a few, and usually most counsellors will offer like a free 15-minute, you know, telephone or WhatsApp video session, just so you can get a feel for what they're like as a person, so you can get to grips with whether you think you will be able to open up to them, whether you will feel safe enough to be able to have a cry if that's what you need to do, if you need to let some of this stuff out. So yeah, I would always recommend therapy, but I also appreciate that not everyone has the time or the money. Not everyone feels as though they would like to be vulnerable with a stranger, although, you know, you do get over that sort of, oh, I don't want to cry in front of a stranger. That usually, if you found someone who's a good fit for you, that fear and that phase usually passes. So, but that is an option for you if that feels right. Um, so I hope that's been helpful slash interesting. As I say, you know, full disclosure, this is a process I'm going through myself at the moment. So yeah, I'm definitely deep in the thick of sort of figuring out where I'm sitting with this, navigating it all. So yeah, I feel for you if you are doing the same. If you wanted to share any of your experiences or any of your thoughts, or if you wanted to add or criticize, you know, feel free to constructively, hopefully, feel free to put your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to like my video or subscribe, then that would be lovely as well. But if not, I will speak to you again some other time. Take care. Bye.